The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We are very pleased to have Delegate Rich Anderson with us today. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Woody. Good to be here again.
Hard at work again for your constituents in your district. How are things going on in your district, especially in terms of the economy?
Well, I represent the 51st House District. It runs from the west edge of Occoquan Town westward out through Lake Ridge, West Ridge, south of Manassas, and then into Brentsville and Oaksville. So I've got this very long district that's very congested in the eastern end and very open and rural in the west. So there's a lot of diverse perspectives that we have there. Of course, we have the continuing economic situation where Northern Virginia and all of its environs have been impacted by federal cutbacks as well as sequestration. Far less government contracts being let with local business, and it's definitely having an impact. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, I've been receiving briefings with my colleagues about the impact that's had, and the reality is that right now, Northern Virginia is not the economic generator that it's been in the past for the rest of the Commonwealth.
And of course, sequestration means that there were just these across-the-board cuts.
Across-the-board cuts. The unfortunate thing about that is I believe that it was unfairly applied. Of that tremendous amount of monies, only 50% were applied to one agency, the Department of Defense, and the remaining 50% were applied to all departments and agencies of the federal government. So there are inequities built in there, and that has resulted in deep, deep cuts to the United States military, probably the deepest cuts that anyone in memory can recall.
And as I recall, the state almost lost an aircraft carrier as a result of that.
Yes, there was some talk about that, but fortunately our congressional delegation engaged directly, and it remains in Norfolk. And of course, that's obviously an economic generator.
One of the other economic generators, although not in your district, is the Port of Virginia. It's a very important gateway, and I think it's one of two ports that's going to be able to handle the increased traffic as a result of the enlargement of the Panama Canal. And that's going to provide some opportunities for Virginia to export more products and services.
I think so. The current governor, as well as his predecessors, have been very energetic in trying to generate overseas markets for Virginians. Virginia products and businesses, and so that is going to be an important part of being able to broaden this economy here in Virginia.
Now, besides the federal government, who are some of the private entities that employ people in your district and the environs?
Well, we of course, academia has a significant footprint. We have a significant presence by the Virginia community college system that does a wonderful job for 2-year and technical training, vocational training within a district. Then of course we have the Prince William campus of George Mason University and Innovation Park, and that is a significant facility. I can talk about it more later, but we envision relocating to or constructing on those grounds a Virginia Veterans Care Center. But George Mason has huge plans for expansion in that area.
Well, let's talk about that care center now, because I know that's a matter of great interest to you. You are a veteran. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the wonderful thing about Virginia, we have 840,000 veterans here, so roughly 1 in 10 people are veterans. Doesn't even count their dependent family members. So with 10% of Virginians holding veteran status, it's important that we care for them. You know, there is a national system, the Veterans Administration, but it simply doesn't have the capacity to care for all. So many states have constructed state-level veterans care centers, counterparts to the VA. We right now have 2 in Virginia. One is the Sitter and Barfoot Veterans Care Center, which is located on the grounds of the McGuire VA Medical Center in Richmond. And then there is the Southwest Virginia Veterans Care Center located in Salem, Virginia, just adjacent to Roanoke. The vision is to add 2 additional Veterans Care Centers, one in Northern Virginia and one in Hampton Roads. So you would have good geographic coverage of the state. These are facilities that would provide comprehensive care to veterans who require a significant amount of care. They typically are 200 plus residents in each facility. They're funded by a combination of federal and state monies. The federal government will pay 65% of the costs, and then construction costs, and then the state will pay 35%. They do not pay for land acquisition. So what we have done here in Virginia is Majority Leader Kirk Cox of Colonial Heights has sponsored 2 bills. One is to get the necessary funding set aside of Virginia state funding to trigger the federal funding from VA so that we can begin to do that in Northern Virginia, and I'm the chief co-patron on that bill. In Southeast Virginia, in the Hampton Roads area, there is a plan to locate a facility in Virginia Beach. And Kirk Cox is also the chief patron for that bill, with Delegate Chris Stolley as the chief co-patron. He's a retired Navy commander. And so it looks like in Prince William County we may be pretty far down the road in fielding a Virginia Veterans Care Center at Innovation Park. So we would probably not do that for another 4 or 5 years before that could be done, but we're working to raise it as high as we can on the VA priority list.
Great. What are we doing to encourage our returning veterans to become entrepreneurs, for example, in the Commonwealth?
Well, that's a pretty good question. Probably the best program that we have for veterans employment is what is called the Virginia Values Veterans Program. We call it V3 for short. I carried a bill 2 years ago with Senator Toddy Puller to create this Virginia Virginia Values Veterans Program, wherein companies would participate in a day-long seminar, learn the unique needs in advertising among the veterans community, hiring veterans, and then retaining them in relatively high-paying jobs. And so that program has now been ongoing for 2 years. And in the last 2 years, Virginia companies have hired, I don't recall the exact number. I saw it just the other day published by the Department of Veterans Services, but it's somewhere on the order of between 5,000 and 6,000 veterans have been hired by companies that have been V3 certified.
What about taking advantage of experiences that veterans have had overseas? For example, if a veteran had been a medic, is there a way for that experience to translate into a certification that doesn't require as much rigor, for example, as going to a junior college or something like that?
Well, several years ago, I can't recall the details, but Virginia passed legislation to recognize equivalency training, skills held by military personnel, and to permit them to be on a fast track for certification here in Virginia. And there is a bill floating around now within this General Assembly to strengthen that even further.
And what about doing away with some of the burdensome rules and regulations in terms of starting a business? I thought a few years ago the State Corporation Commission attempted to streamline some of those requirements, especially as they relate to veterans.
You know, I can't recall exactly what we did with that, but several years ago we did do some work so that they would be, veteran startup companies would be on a fast track, cut through all this red tape, and then be able to get a business license in a short period of time so they can get into business and start being productive on the premise that veterans probably have the skill set and the work ethic that makes them world-class workers who can operate world-class businesses.
Right, right. And of course, you mentioned the impact of sequestration. Now, everybody recognizes the need to diversify our economy, and I'm sure that's something you and your colleagues are working on. Are there those kinds of needs in your district? Diversification of the economy.
Well, there always is, because if you have all your eggs in one proverbial basket, obviously with the upturns and downturns of the economy, it will have a significant impact. So a diversified economy is definitely the way to go. As you know, the executive branch here in Virginia has been talking about a new Virginia economy, and I at least am in full agreement on that, is trying to regenerate this economy within Virginia, and it's going to take all of us across all branches of government, across both houses of the General Assembly, in order to be able to do that successfully. But diversification is very important.
Now, you mentioned your service on the Appropriations Committee. I know last year the state had to tap the rainy day fund. There's still a significant hole that's going to have to be plugged. It's going to have an impact, but I understand that you're trying to hold harmless K through 12, for example,
Correct.
and to
Correct.
some extent our junior colleges and our institutions of higher learning.
Well, of course, in 2009, just before I got here, that started. We were in the deep plunge of this national economy, which affected us in Virginia. That required the trimming by several $billion of monies devoted to the Virginia budget. I remember getting here for my first session in 2010, and the direction that we were given as a body is that we needed to do deep cuts. I think it was somewhere on the order of $6 billion, which was a huge amount in a state budget. And so we had to set about and do that work. We were able to do that, but it did result in cuts to education. It was the reality of this economy. Through the years, we have been able, in subsequent budgets, to gradually restore those monies, but we are not yet back to the original funding levels. Hopefully, in the next few cycles, we will be, and then we can move forward from there. But in this General Assembly, working on this budget for a state fiscal year 2016 that starts on the 1st of July, our goal is to do no cuts to education, to at least move through with level funding.
Are you hearing any more from your constituents about an issue that was big last year that apparently has carried over in reference to the standards of learning and the need to change those or tweak them a little bit more?
Well, there was, I heard a lot about that. I certainly didn't lead that effort down here. Delegate Tag Greason pretty much led that effort, as you well know. And, but I had heard from parents, from students, from school administrators, and from teachers that students were simply tested way too much. And because of that, there was a tendency with teachers and educators to teach to the test. And I saw that play out in the various schools I visited. I try to go into a school once every week or two. So I spend a lot of time in our schools. I have to. I'm not an educator. I don't serve on the House Education Committee, and yet education is so important to Prince William and all communities in Virginia. So I spend a lot of time, I do spend a lot of time in schools, and that is a constant refrain I hear. During last year's legislative session down here, I got a phone call from the principal of Woodbridge Senior High School who asked in May if I would come by the high school and spend several hours with him during the week when they do SOL testing. And would I just simply walk around the school, observe the testing environment, the impact it had on the school, the attitude of those who had to administer the program, and the students who had to be administered the test. And I definitely saw that there needed to be revisions. Those took place last year, and more work needs to be done, but we got started.
And of course, our junior college system continues to provide what we need in terms of attracting new businesses and maintaining the ones we have. We need a workforce in development, so to speak, and I know that you've been involved with those issues as well.
Well, obviously, it goes without saying, a truism is that strong education system feeds a solid workforce, and that brings businesses into Virginia. We've done very well attracting businesses to Virginia for a whole host of reasons, but that's because we have such an effective system of public and private institutions of higher learning around the state, and also complemented by a very vigorous community college system. I remember being a young kid growing up in Roanoke in the mid-'60s, and news came out that the Governor Godwin, Mills Godwin, had led an effort for a community college system across the state, and we were going to have Virginia Western Community College constructed in Roanoke. And it's been a very effective system where kids can go there, students can go there for 2 years, live at home, and then transition into a 4-year institution. If an academic degree is not their calling and they want to learn a market skill or trade, it's a wonderful opportunity. I just think that the community college system is just, in Virginia, second to none.
As a matter of fact, that's the 2+2 program, I think it's popularly called. And if a student attains a certain grade point average, they are virtually guaranteed admission to one of our institutions of higher learning.
I can't think of a better bargain for the young people of today.
And of course, it serves another purpose, especially since we've gone through this great recession. There were a number of adults who unfortunately were let go. They needed new skills, and so they were able to obtain some of those new skills and certifications through the junior college system.
Correct.
Starting to see some reports, however, of students complaining about tuition increases at our institutions of higher learning. That's something you're going to be dealing with in appropriations and throughout the budget process.
Yes.
How do you see that coming out?
Well, obviously I can't predict how it comes out. There is a bill that has been patroned by, I think it's Delegate Kirk Cox, to cap athletic fees at universities, which has been one of the drivers behind increased fees and expenses at public colleges and universities.
Now, you also serve on the Transportation Committee. What kinds of issues there are you looking at in terms of impact in your district?
Well, on transportation, I had a Transportation Committee meeting this morning. I don't think that there are any glaring programs or proposed initiatives. We, of course, have a pretty vigorous docket on the House Transportation Committee. But that said, I think in our area, the real issue of focus is, of course, the transition from the old HOV lanes to the new hot lanes, also known as the I-95 express lanes. People are just now trying that on for size. People are just now picking up their Easy Pass or their Easy Pass Flex. I finally broke down and bought one several months ago. I've used it once on the 495 section, and it let me get to a meeting on time. So we'll see how it goes, but right now there are, I receive communications from constituents that love it because it gets them quickly to where they need to go, and then I receive communications from constituents that are frustrated by either the pricing fees to use the hot lanes or perhaps a misunderstanding about traffic flows and entry into the lanes. But VDOT and Transurban have done a wonderful job with their website in establishing clear guidance and videos and other helpful hints to individuals who use the hot lanes.
Has the slug community been able to...
Well, I tell you what, I'm a slugger at heart. For 8 years, I slugged from the Horner Road lot in eastern Prince William County to the Pentagon and back at night. Sometimes I took riders as a driver. More often than not, I jumped in as a rider because you could work on your lap and had about 40 minutes to get things done. The slug system is wonderful, and the reason it's wonderful is it's people-powered. Individual commuters get together and have worked out a solution called the slugging system. Government doesn't run it or manage it, and so it runs very smoothly. I have been watching it very closely to see if there is any evidence that the hot lanes will adversely impact the slug system in any kind of way. I freely admit I'm biased because I used it for 8 years and it's a wonderful system. If I discern that there are problems emerging with the slug system, if it's being hampered in any way, I plan to get involved because it's a wonderful system.
Well, congratulations on your chairmanship of the Science and Technology Committee.
Thank you.
That's a great opportunity for you. What kinds of issues do you see pursuing this session and beyond?
Well, the House Committee on Science and Technology is the newest committee. I think it's existed a half dozen or 8 years, unlike House P&E, Privileges and Election, that Thomas Jefferson served on. And so what I want to do is I want to see that committee generated in terms of its tempo, the number of bills it's focusing on, the things it's doing for the Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads and Central Virginia science and technology business communities. What I plan on doing is after session, before we all go home and get involved in campaigns throughout the fall, this being an election year in Virginia, my intention is to meet with Northern Virginia science and technology companies and then to do the same thing down in Hampton Roads. And I spoke to a representative yesterday from the Central Virginia science and technology community. I want that group of folks to help me write a legislative agenda for 2016. I met recently after Speaker Howe had made the decision that I would chair that committee. I picked up the telephone and called the Secretary of Technology for the Commonwealth, sat down with Secretary Jackson, spoke with her for a couple of hours about ways that we can partner on science and technology issues between the executive and legislative branches. And so I really want to see that body get engaged deeper into working with the science and tech community to create science and tech jobs in the Commonwealth, because by definition, those are high-paying jobs.
So that fits right into science, technology, engineering, and math. The
Correct.
kinds of things that we want to focus on in terms of our students, be they K through 8 community college, and especially our institutions of higher learning.
Correct. Absolutely.
So what kinds of things have you learned from the conversations you've had with individuals who are astute in the areas of science and technology?
Well, I've learned that nurturing the science and technology business community in Virginia is crucial for our economy. And this science and technology community is far larger than I imagined. Shortly after I was appointed chairman several weeks ago, I went to an annual dinner of the science and technology community under the flag of the Northern Virginia Technology Council that leads that effort. And I walked in that room, and there were easily 1,000 people in that room for that dinner. And it's where the industry recognizes the leading company, particularly those that are doing innovative things. And a light bulb came on for me that we have got here within Virginia state government is get out of their way and let them create jobs and do the thing that they know how to do.
You know, it's kind of interesting because I think there is currently a moratorium on the use of drones generally. There are exceptions for law enforcement, but of course that's something that is science related and developing within the Commonwealth.
That's something that I want to really find a way to move through that dialogue. There are a number of diverse perspectives on that. One perspective is that drone or unmanned aerial vehicle technology can be misused to collect information on private citizens by government. There's concerns about that.
Right.
But at the same time, I think we can specify a rule set so that that does not happen, and yet at the same time nurture the use of unmanned aerial vehicles for business and economic development.
Talk to us a little bit about what's been going on over the past year as a result of the unfortunate circumstances our former governor found himself in, and the need for ethics reform here in the General Assembly and with the executive branches, state agencies, boards, and commissions.
Well, I think we've got to do some deep changes to that. I'm in favor of an aggressive approach. I'm in favor of some very stringent requirements on legislators and lobbyists and all kinds of public officials to be more open, accountable, transparent in this whole thing. I'm comfortable with that simply because having spent 30 years in an Air Force uniform, I worked in a culture that had very stringent restrictions on accepting anything of value from anybody outside of the Department of Defense and from the private sector. Anything that could be construed as influencing my work as a uniformed member of the United States military. And so I think we've got to do the same thing in defining a new ethics rule set for Virginia. So I'm fine with it being an aggressive bill. I will vote for it. I think it ought to be something that will bring both houses and both parties together so that we can reach agreement on that. I think that, in fact, I don't think I know people out there want us to do that.
And of course, the definitions that will be included in whatever legislation comes out is very important. For example, close personal friends,
Right.
relatives to whatever degree, and of course,
Right.
the intangible kinds of gifts
Right.
that people have to consider.
That's correct. You know, we've had this debate about tangible versus intangible gifts and the kind of caps that should be placed on them. I think we ought to just get rid of that distinction between tangible and intangible. It makes my head hurt to try to define whether something is tangible or intangible. And so get rid of the distinction. But we've got to have some rigid requirements.
Now, what about the
Pure and simple.
necessity for some kind of commission to provide guidance to members of the General Assembly about what is within the rules?
I am in favor of, call it independent if you want, but ethics advisory commission or council or whatever nomenclature you want to employ, against whom we could bounce proposals for all kinds of things and get a ruling from them about whether that would be appropriate or inappropriate when measured against existing Virginia code. I'm not too enthused about the concept of an independent counsel that can do such things as bring charges, levy all kinds of sanctions, because that system has existed in D.C. And to be quite frank, it has been misused by both parties for political purposes.
Got less than a minute left,
Okay.
but I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to future leaders. You have a student with
Yes,
you
I
today
do.
who's shadowing you. What advice do you have for people who want to become members of the General Assembly?
Well, I would say keep on doing what you're doing, because this is the third year I've done what I call the Future Delegate Program. Every day I bring a different student down here from Prince William County. I end up having, over the course of the legislative session, 36 students and their families. And I find that they're all outstanding students. The next generation, we're in good shape. And so I tell them, keep on with your studies, stay in school, and watch the political process. You'll be a part of it someday.
Great. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Delegate Rich Anderson. Good to see you.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.